Good morning. Well, a lot has happened since we last had a video published. Today I just wanted to make a little video about monetary policy and what's going on with inflation right now, because it really seems like the bulk of us still seem to have our heads in the sand about what's actually occurring. So, in previous videos I talked a little bit about monetary policy, specifically the Breaton Woods Agreement, 1944, that linked the value of the US dollar to gold. Breton Woods 2, of course, we all know that happened in 1971, and that was when Richard Nixon decoupled gold and the US dollar and basically attached, through a backroom deal with the Saudis and what became OPEC, attached the value of the US dollar semi to oil, but really it was a means of pegging it to become the international currency of trade. Um, and now, just recently, we're looking at Breton Woods 3. March 2022 is what the IMF had just announced. And very interesting, actually, some of the comments that we're seeing from our politicians lately. Just 2 days ago, Joe Biden actually had made a off-the-cuff comment, as he seems to love making lately. I think it was unintentional, but he said that we're at an inflection point, and the monetary policy, as we move into this new era post-inflection point, is going to change dramatically from where we were before. Well, that's of course incredibly true. We are at an inflection point. Things are changing dramatically. Now, the news has all been about inflation lately, and it should be about inflation because that's the biggest monetary issue we have right now. But inflation has been a problem since really going back to about 2008 to 2010. Whereas in Canada, and I'm just using Canada as an example here, housing prices have literally over doubled, about 2.25 times what they were prior to 2008. So that's an amazing increase in value, if you want to call it an increase in value. What I propose, though, is quite the opposite. If you follow commodities, you'll notice that commodities such as zinc, steel, cobalt, all of your special heavy metals, that sort of stuff, they have all been increasing exponentially, especially in the last 3 to 5 years. And that's actually kind of an interesting point, because those housing prices we were talking about that have gone up so dramatically in such a short period of time, the bulk of that, actually almost 50% of that increase, has been in the last 5 years. So if you narrow that window down and take a look at commodities prices in that same period of time, you're going to notice a couple of things. You're going to notice that gold has basically been stagnant, same as silver. Okay, that's interesting. Why? We'll get into that in a minute. But things like nickel, especially, up over 400% at this point from where it was. Again, steel, 225% from where it was. My argument is that inflation, as the traditional means of measurement. So when we look at CPI and we look at what it is a loaf of bread costs us in the grocery store, because that's how the average person pegs inflation. It's not real. And what we're seeing now is not the traditional model of inflation, but we're seeing, and we have been seeing, a devaluation of the US and all linked currencies, so the Canadian dollar, the Australian dollar, the euro. Its relative buying power has been diminished, and is quietly being subverted by the BRICS countries, of course. So this is Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and all of their affiliate countries, which are mostly the core of Africa, the north of Africa, parts of the Middle East, and everything that ends with a stan, basically, in Europe. So, what does this mean for us going forward? Well, some people are very cautious these days about media and conspiracy theories and that sort of stuff. And I mean, you should be. But you should also have an open mind about what's going on. People talk about the Great Reset as a conspiracy theory. I don't believe it's really a conspiracy theory. I'm also not a fearmonger, though. In fact, Justin Trudeau himself has referenced the Great Reset on multiple occasions. You can go to YouTube and look at those sound bites yourself and see what he's referring to. So, I mean, really, how does this all tie in together? Well, we already know that there's a lot of countries that are stopping or reducing their exposure to the US dollar. We know that Brazil, Russia, China, India, all those big boys, they're planning something, and they're up to something, and we kind of already know what that is. Last week, Russia very, very quietly announced that it's going to peg the ruble to gold, and it's going to peg that exchange value at 52 rubles per gram of gold. That happened almost without no public knowledge and very little media coverage. Why? Because it's, again, I don't mean to sound sensationalistic, but it's the beginning of the end for the US dollar is what's going to happen. Now, if my suspicions are true, and we have countries like BRICS form a common gold-backed currency to fight the US dollar, and what the Great Reset predicts is people who predict around the Great Reset is going to happen with the new digital currency, digital ID, this sort of thing that's supposed to come out. It's going to be interesting to see where the world goes. If they're going to go to a traditional currency model and follow what is really 1/3 of the world's population with this Brazil, Russia, India, China, this BRICS common core currency, which, by the way, will provide a great hedge for them against any form of sanctions in the future from the US and its allies, again. Or if they're going to migrate over to the US and its partner nations with their new digital currencies. So, interesting times ahead, and I guess we're going to have to see what will happen from there. You really should do some reading on Breaton Woods 2022 and, of course, the two previous Breaton Woods agreements and understand what goes on from there. Many economists involved in these processes in the past, they will tell you, monetary specialists, they will tell you that this is a revitalizing monetary policy is something that happens every 2 or 3 generations, every 30 to 50 years, depending upon when it's needed. And I mean, we're at that, as Biden said just the other day, we're at that inflection point right now as to what the future way ahead is going to be. Now, some interesting developments in Ukraine at the same time. For some reason, everybody seems to buy into the idea that Russia was actually trying to take Kiev, and that they're kind of backing off now because Ukrainians are fighting so strongly that they're forcing them to back down. That's not the case. Kiev was only ever a part of Russia's military operation because, well, think about it. It's the capital of the country. If the true goal is controlling the east and the southeast, the land bridge down to Sevastopol and that region, Crimea, how are you going to deflect most of Ukraine's troops and assets and equipment? Of course, they're going to protect their capital. So you throw some troops up there, and you see it, because a lot of those hits that Russia was having up in that area were kind of those hit and run kind of attacks. And it just really made a picture like they were going to try to push into Kiev. But it never, of course, transpired. And it will never transpire, because it's that sort of urban warfare. It takes a lot of personnel and a lot of resources to capture a capital city like that. In fact, that's not even how you would take it. You would fully surround it and basically starve it out, because that's the only way that you'd effectively be able to control it. You can't go into, 1 million plus houses and apartment buildings with, 100,000 troops and sanitize them all. It's just not something that you can do over such a mass scale. But anyways, that's a little interesting point of what's going on. Hopefully, though, there's signs that peace might actually be on the horizon. I don't know if I actually believe that or not. I don't know if I believe it from either side, because I don't think Russia has completed its objectives as to what its overall intentions are for the country. And I don't believe that the Ukrainians are at a point right now where they're actually going to be negotiating in any form of good faith. They have so much international support right now, and they are gaining so much economically from the global support and the outcry that, you know, as much as you hate to say it, it's almost as if they have motivation to continue. After all, I mean, it's like most wars, it's not the politicians that do the dying, right? It's the people. So that said, at some point, hopefully us, the people, start thinking about what our politicians are doing, and we no longer accept this sort of rationale or approach to things that they've been taking on. But anyways, kind of going off on a bit of a side rant. Anyways, hope everybody is well. I just wanted to give a bit of an update as to what's going on economically. Take a look. You'll see bond yield inversion, of course, big red flag about what's coming for the markets right now. It's almost undeniable that we'll be heading towards a major recession at this point, and how that correction is going to manifest itself is going to be, I think, well, life-changing for a lot of people. Keep an eye on gold prices, of course. Keep an eye on U.S. Treasuries, and I think what you're going to see is early summer, you're going to see a strong run up. You're going to see markets kind of go a little bit crazy, and then you're going to see a catastrophic pullback sometime mid to late summer, barring anything cataclysmic happening with the war. I think this is how it's going to play out, and that'll be the beginning. I'm looking at beginning probably sometime in the September window, September, October, August, September, October, somewhere in there, of this pullback and a broader market correction, and be prepared for it. Like anything in the correction, you can make a lot of money at the same time if you're conscious about what's going on and you're prepared. So diversify, hedge, and look at ways to leverage your money against the devaluation of the US dollar. I'm doing that by playing some Chinese ETFs myself. So, you know, take a look at what's available in your markets, whether you're in Canada or the US, that sort of thing. And what I'm doing there is I'm playing the increase in spread that the contents of these ETFs, even though they're traded in Canadian dollars, the contents of these ETFs will go up proportionally if the dollar devalues itself. So if you see a 20 or 30% reduction in the value of the dollar, Chinese stocks that are held inside these ETFs should proportionally go up by that same amount, plus any appreciation that would be there. So I'm playing basically a 1 to 3 ratio against my entire portfolio value, and that's where I'm looking at. Now, I haven't dropped all US content from my portfolio. In fact, I still have quite a bit of it. But I'm leveraging that a little bit with some other things. So I'm crypto miners, again, big Bitcoin miners, Ethereum miners. I'm using that as a bit of a hedge as well. And I'm actually using physical traditional miners as well in Canadian dollars. So Canadian mining companies for gold, oil, natural gas, like all the commodities, nickel, again. So those should provide relatively good hedges against devaluation of the US dollar and a major economic downturn in the US. So anyways, any thoughts, comments, fire them off below, especially if you have any thoughts about what's going on in the markets or what could happen economically in the next year. I'm always open to some discussion, so fire them off. Have a good day. I'm off to the beach, so take care. Bye.